Give me a sec while I get my monitor screen in place here. There we go. And let's get this back in place here. Alright, welcome. Thank you for checking in. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I got a new back screen going on there. I don't know if I kind of changed it up for you guys a little bit. Keep things kind of going up here, keep things fun and fresh. And today as I was sitting down, I was thinking about, some of the mythological families, and I wanted to take a look at 3 of the worst siblings in all mythology. These people were just, on a lot of levels, just bad people, horrible people, each and every one of them. And if you're up on your mythology, you'll be able to hang in on this one. And we'll talk about these characters and why each one of them is definitively a nominee for the worst sibling of all time, right? So let's look at Loki here, the first guy we got up here. Loki, who is Norse god. Of course, he's involved in mischief by his name. I mean, by admission, you're the god of mischief. So we already know kind of what we can expect out of you. And in true to form, he lives up to his name and then some. Loki has a long list of trespasses that I don't understand how the Asgardians continue to overlook for so long. Let us not forget the time that he took Thor's wife and he chopped her hair off. Or wait, he chopped her golden hair off. And that's, of course, a big thing for them. And Thor had to go through this whole thing about getting new hair, magical hair for her. Then there's a time that, of course, that he turned Thor into a frog, which happened in a myth, right? Using his magic. And then let us not forget, probably the most significant thing about Loki is his role in Ragnarok, that he plays a contributing role in the end of Asgard, right? He literally sires all 3 of the creatures that you need to bring about Ragnarok. Hela, their personification of Hel, the Midgardian serpent, and the Fenris wolf. All those 3 are children of Loki. So without Loki, you can't have the end of Ragnarok. So Loki does everything to not be down with Thor and the rest of them. How they kept him around all that time is completely beyond me. It seemed like it was a ridiculous thing that they did. It was absolutely ridiculous they kept Loki around that entire time. All right. Now, the next figure that we're going to look at here in the absolutely worst siblings of all time category is, of course, Inanna. And let's not forget about what Inanna does. Now, I know a lot of you guys are like, Inanna was really beautiful, and so you give her a pass. Inanna gets a pass for a lot of stuff because she's reportedly super, incredibly good looking. I'm just going to be honest about that with Inanna, okay? But the thing about Inanna is she was terrible to almost everybody in her entire family. Forget about the people on Earth. She's a terrible queen for the most part. Although they show flashes of her, represent herself. But let's think about the time that Inanna got drunk with her father, and convinced him to give up all his power to her, and they had to hunt her down in order to get the power back. And I don't think they got all of it back in that mythology, right? Let's think about who Inanna was. Let's think about this, okay? You're Gilgamesh. And think about this. I don't like Gilgamesh at all, but this is a crazy story about Gilgamesh and Inanna. Just so you can understand some backstory on who Inanna is. Okay, so Gilgamesh, who is the king of Uruk, gets a message from his mother, who's also a goddess, and she tells him, "Hey, you need to get to Uruk, and you need to be a king of your people. You have some stuff you need to do." So Gilgamesh is like, okay, let me get back to Uruk. I got some stuff I got to take care of. And who does he meet standing outside the gates of Uruk but this lady here, Inanna, who refuses to let him pass. Refuses him to let him pass until he has sex with her. Now think about it. Right? That's who Inanna is. This goddess of love and beauty, always heavily worshipped. And she says, okay, Gilgamesh, I'm not going to let you into your own kingdom until we have sex. And he's like, look, come on, Inanna. Look, I got to go to work. You can imagine this scenario. You have to go to work. Your boss is already on you about something going on in Uruk. They're like, yeah, you need to get down to Uruk and make sure this stuff is resolved. I like a TPS report on the whole situation in the morning. That's what Gilgamesh is dealing with. So he's got to get this TPS report back on what's going on in Uruk And he's like, he leaves. He's like, goes back. He's like, hey, Inanna's tripping. Okay, she won't let me get in. They're like, look, you need to go back. There's some things going on in Uruk. You need to be the king, be in Uruk, and make decisions. So again, Gilgamesh, comes back and he's like, okay, there's Inanna again. Once again, Inanna is here, and she's like, hey, Gilgamesh, good to see you. I'm not gonna let you pass until you let me have you. And he's like, no. So he starts getting a little upset. And we all know how Gilgamesh is. He's not the most level-headed of guys in the world anyway. So Gilgamesh gets upset and he starts throwing some nasty insults about Inanna. Long story short, her response is to unleash the Bull of Heaven, which we're getting into a little bit more about why she's a terrible sibling for this. I know these are all just terrible actions that Inanna has committed at this point, but she gets into being a terrible sibling. Now she unleashes the Bull of Heaven, who coincidentally happens to be the husband of her sister Erishkigal, right? Who is runs the underworld in this pantheon. Okay, so she calls the Bull of Heaven out because she's insulted that Gilgamesh didn't want her and turned her down. This is her whole reason. This is the only reason. Let's not even get into worrying about how much damage the Bull of Heaven does. He just he drinks up all the rivers. He eats up all the field of dates. He's just eating everything. This is a bull from heaven. He can't survive on the food of earth. It's not enough for him. It's not plentiful enough for him. So finally, Gilgamesh, who is still at the time rolling with his friend Enkidu, says, okay, we're going to have to stop this bull. Or we got to go do something about this bull. He's drinking up all the rivers, right? He ate up all the sacred date fields over here. We don't have any rivers anymore. We don't have any date fields because of this bull. So they say, okay. So Gilgamesh and Enkidu, who are a nice duo. This is one of the best, two-man pick and roll teams ever. Gilgamesh and Enkidu. So they roll out and they find the Bull of Heaven, and within a short battle, they manage to cut his head off. They cut his head off. They chop. He dedicates the meat to the people of Uruk, which I'm sure they're happy about it. He takes one of the legs and he throws it back up at Inanna in defiance. Okay, so now that was your brother-in-law, and your brother-in-law is now dead. Your sister Erishkigal still lives in the underworld. Her husband's dead now because of your nonsense. That's Inanna. Okay, that's who she is. Okay, so we're gonna fast forward, past that part to the part where now Inanna goes back to her same sisters. One day Inanna's. So the story is this. I'll give you guys a brief backstory of Inanna. Okay, if you never heard this one, this is a good one. So Inanna is hanging out with two demons. Why she's hanging out with two demons, I have no idea. But this is the mythology on Inanna. It says a lot about who she is. So she's hanging out with two demons, and the two demons are like, hey, Inanna, so you're like the queen of heaven, and you have all this power. And, the only thing that can make you even more powerful would be if you were also the queen of the underworld. And Inanna, given her personality, says, you know what? You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. Okay. So she's like, okay, I'm going to go down to the underworld. That is her sister's house. This is what her sister's, is her sister's kingdom. I have a kingdom that's already better. I have heaven. I'm the queen of heaven. I would think for most people, that's good enough. Not Inanna. I think that says a lot. I think this is one of the best stories about who Inanna is, that you're the queen of heaven. That's not enough. So Inanna gets all, she gets all together, and she puts on her head robe, and she puts on her gear, and she's like, I'm going to roll down to the underworld, and I'm about to claim that from my own sister, who's currently in mourning because I got her husband killed on some BS with Gilgamesh. So fortunately for Erishkigal, she was able to defeat Inanna, even killed her. Of course, Daddy, who is the reason why Inanna behaves the way she does right now, her daddy says, all right, I will resurrect Inanna, and I make a deal so that Inanna can come back, right? Even though Inanna's dead. So they resurrect Inanna's body. They use a spell. Enlil sends us this tree of life. I think it's a tree of life and river of life. And they bring Inanna back to life, as the mythology tells us. So they bring her back to life, but Erishkigal's like, I don't care if you're alive or not. Once you come to the underworld, you don't leave the underworld. Now, this is a significant story in mythology because we have to remember what Inanna actually does here, okay? There's only like 3 people in all mythology who go to the underworld and come back, right? So we're talking like Jesus. I can't remember who the Greek guy who played the instrument. He tried to go get his wife. He played his instrument. He swayed death with his sorrow of his song. Whoever that Greek guy was, right? And Inanna. These are the only stories about people going to. I think there may be a mythology about Thor fighting his way out of the underworld, but Inanna goes to the underworld, and because of all this intervention, she comes back from the underworld. But there's still blood on her hands when she comes back because she has to get someone to take her place. So she comes back with these demons who've negotiated her return back to Earth or back to the living. And she kind of goes to her kingdom and she goes, "Oh, not her. That's my number 1 assistant. I need her. Not him. That's my hairdresser." Comes finally to her husband, Demuzit, and she's like, "Him." And ends up sending her own husband, Demuzit, to the underworld in her steed, right? That's how important she is. The problem is that we know Demuzit was a shepherd. Demuzit was key to actually keeping the harvest plentiful. That's where this story comes from. They weren't on the whole Demeter and Persephone nonsense. They said it was Demuzit. So she sends him to the underworld. Now the crops don't grow. This is how much Inanna doesn't care about all the rest of us either, right? Not to consider her own sibling who she just screwed over as well. So finally, Demuzit, they have to work a deal where Demuzit's sister comes back for 6 months of the year. He stays 6 months a year in the underworld. And that's why we have seasons per Sumerian mythology. Okay. So that's kind of the backstory on how terrible Inanna is. So now we can talk about Set and how Set is the comedic Egyptian entry into terrible sibling. So the backstory with Set, of course, is he's the brother of Osar, or Osiris, how if you're calling him by the Egyptian name. And his story is that he ultimately kills his own brother, tricks his own brother Osar, who was a beloved deity, and then proceeds to take over the kingdom, attempts to rape his sister, who is Isis or Aset. He attempts to rape Isis because why not? I guess I'm Set. And then he would clash with his nephew, Heru, for like hundreds of years. They would fight this war for supremacy. A war that took a great toll on both of them. They both had, incredible injuries. They lost eyes and in some cases testicles fighting against each other. And at one point, Set attempts to rape his nephew, which I think is the same time they end up losing his testicles for that attempted rape in there. So that's the backstory of Set. But the difference between all these characters is that they're all pretty much equally terrible. I am going to give you an asterisk by each one of these characters to kind of justify. Now, in the case of Loki, although he was traitorous to the Asgardians, that's actually what he should have been. He was the son of a Jotun giant. He was not an Asgardian, so he actually, by every single one of his actions, actually stayed true to what his heritage was. And as for Loki, I'd say, man, you're a real soldier to stand up against, Thor and all that in Asgard and still be true to who you are. You brought all the completely destructive creatures of their mythology to life. All came from your seed. I applaud you for that, right? So that's who Loki is. So I'm giving that you cannot be the worst sibling because you were the adopted sibling from my enemy. You were Theon Greyjoy for everyone who watches Game of Thrones, except you had a heart and all your other equipment. And I have to give an asterisk to Set. I know it's going to surprise some of you guys. Like, why would I give a pass to Set? Okay, here's the thing. Asar did sleep with his wife. We know the whole story about Asar hooked up with Nephthys, and their son is it's not Ptah. I'm forgetting who their son is. The son of the deity of death, Anubis. Their son is Anubis. Anubis, now remember, Nephthys is Set's wife. Because Set represented infertility, he wasn't able to get the job done, so to say. And the mythology tells us that either Nephthys tricked Asar or she worked out a deal with Aset and allowed this thing to go down. So Set for, look, you hooked up with my wife. I kind of got a reason to be mad. So I'm going to give him a pass. And for outside of that, he played his role as, a very staunch defender of Ra. Every time, every night I slay the enemies of Ra. So I can't be too mad at this guy. He does his thing. He's a double-edged sword. We get that about Set. He's a hot boy. We appreciate that about you, Set. So I have to come squarely to Inanna, as you are probably one of the worst, not only siblings, but you're probably one of the worst mythological characters of all time. Inanna is among the most selfish deities that we ever see in any mythology. I don't understand how anyone's able to mess with Inanna, outside of the fact that we know, yeah, Inanna's super good looking. That's what it comes down to. So there you have it today. That's our entry, is who is literally the worst sibling in all mythology. I think that falls squarely on the dainty shoulders of this wonderful deity person here, who we have known as Inanna or Astarte or several other names that she uses, because she has to change her name all the time. If you lived like she lived, you would change your name all the time too. That's why there's so many incarnations of Inanna. You see her in all these different cultures, because Inanna goes places and she sets stuff off, and then she can't go back, so she has to come up with another name. So she's far worse than Loki, who was just doing what he should have been predictably doing. Or Set, it's like, yeah, they did smash your wife. Everything Inanna did, she did by her own choice. That's what she wanted to do. She wanted to mess with Gilgamesh. She wanted to unleash the Bull of Heaven. She wanted to claim her sister's underworld kingdom for her own, because she was listening to some demons. That's literally the mythology on that. You guys are going to have to look it up. I'll read the mythology to you on that one. That's who Inanna is, by far the worst sibling in mythology. So anyway, thanks for stopping in. I hope you appreciate the new spaceship style background that we're working in here, but we'll be back with some more mythology for you guys. As always, stop, click, like, subscribe, and most definitely go and check